Guys, one of the things that I notice that reminds me of hoarders, or my 600-pound life, or whatever that is, 1,000-pound life. I don't know what it is. I just see the ad now and then. If you guys watch those shows, I can't watch hoarders. I noticed that when I'm on social media, which I am every now and then, I've even joined Twitter, also known as X. There's an obesity of words. I know you're supposed to give short things on X or whatever. Short texts, short tweets. Man, there's an obesity of words. There's just too many. And we need a word fast. As I make a podcast. The irony is not lost on me. Okay, so calm down. Today, we talk about fasting. We talk about the direct application of doing less stuff, in this case eating, in order to heal the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems and other things. I learned science in this talk with Dr. Pete Patitsas. Interesting character. Can't wait for you to have this conversation for free on Heavy Things Lightly. Hi guys, it's so Dr. Pete's back. This makes my day. First of all, how you been? It's been about 3 months. People loved this last pod we did.
No, thanks, John. I'm glad to hear that. It's been too long, and I'm seeing the other side of it. But Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, so Christ is born, and so it's all that time of year. It's wonderful.
Same to you. We were just talking about how I'm old calendar. You've always sort of known old calendar in your life, and so January 7th. Like January is Christmas time, so that's always very interesting. I like folks that know that, because a lot of folks just think I'm celebrating Epiphany. Like non-Orthodox be like, "Oh, it's Epiphany." I'm like,
Yeah, I'm part of the Greek Archdiocese, but I do celebrate Nativity on the 7th, and I go down to a Serbian Orthodox church to pay homage to that. And of course, the majority of Orthodox Christians, aka Russia, probably the center of gravity there, celebrates on the 7th. But anyway.
Yeah, and the Georgians.
Yeah, the Georgians, different parts of the Polish world, Romanian world, and then just April. So
man.
It's all there. It's more Jesus being celebrated, the better, in my opinion.
That's right, exactly. So the Athos Diet, right?
Yeah.
And
no, please.
I want you back for this reason. I'll kick you off with this, okay? And you can explain, for folks who didn't see our first pod or aren't familiar with your work, you can explain what you do. But I want to go in this direction, and maybe you'll help me, is I tend to poo-poo science. It's not because I don't think there's a real thing called the study of the material world through observation and the scientific method. That's real. That's a thing. But it's because people who are scientific don't realize they're often worshiping the method like it's a god. And so sometimes I like to make fun of that worship. But on this pod, I want you to take us kind of into the science, if you will, a little bit about what this fasting does scientifically, and then we'll link it into the art of fasting and the monastics. But can you start with something like that and tell us about your book? Start there maybe, and then jump into that.
Maybe just to give the audience a bridge to this podcast and the last one. So the last one I would say was more philosophical, sort of the first principles case for why we fast, why it makes sense, and we kind of trusted that there was a scientific benefit, but we didn't display the mechanism. And in the book, of course, and on this 45 to an hour long podcast, I'm hoping to kind of dive into that very explicitly. But, I want to emphasize this point, and I think this is a good example or a related point. You can't institutionalize everything. It's just too expensive. There's a reason why, like, nursing homes are maxed out, and historically parents were just supposed to live with you. Like, you can only outsource family so much. You can only outsource health so much, outsource morality that much, even finance that much, until finally you go bankrupt. And one of the cool examples I knew of it, and every once in a while I listen to a TED Talk. One of these ones was on the Middle East, but they had this discussion about how the fact that for a great deal of time in the Middle East, there were no prisons. So, in order to take care of criminality, it was corporal punishment, and it was kind of like symbolic gestures of justice that let people know, hey, this person's a criminal. They're not to do it again, and they got punished. And what I mean by that, it's like you steal something, get your hand chopped off. I mean, it sounds crazy, and it is. It's too much. But I will say, if you don't have 2 million people in prison like we do in the United States, it might even be more than that.
It's more.
I think it's the largest prison population in the world.
Correct.
And so if you don't have that, how do you reintroduce people into society with justice, with a fresh start, and at the same time let people know there's a problem? And so, you just can't institutionalize everything. And of course, our prison system is kind of bankrupt as it stands already. But anyway, when you carry this over to the concept of healthcare, it's like, to what extent will we eventually bankrupt ourselves by
Mm.
trying to treat everything after it starts? And so that goes back to the principle we brought up last time, where the statistics about 100 million people having diabetes or pre-diabetes, us spending nearly $5 trillion on healthcare last year in the United States, our country literally going bankrupt from an aging population who's taking just two meds. And there's all sorts of reasons why that is: corruption in pharmacies, corporatism, etc. But what I want to say is there something in the wisdom and culture of Orthodox countries and lands and in the church itself that literally can take care of a problem before it starts? And my argument is that fasting is that solution. And not only does it bring you closer to God spiritually, but resonating with that two-barrel gun is that there's a huge health benefit.
Mm.
And what I want to start out by saying again, as I said before, was when you don't just study what the monks of Mount Athos or various monasteries across the world, what they eat, how much they eat, but also when they eat, this has a powerful scientific punch. And the Athos Diet, as I said before, has this three-pillar strategy, which is intermittent fasting, plant-based diet, and walking. And just right off the top, as I said before, when you intermittent fast, any mammalian species will live 30 to 40% longer. So why is that? And that's my hope today, that we can explore mechanistically why that is.
Okay. That can before you go down that path, can I take you back for 1 second?
Absolutely.
I know you have an opinion on this. Well, let me put it differently. I believe that you will. So, do you think that there is a coalition of the unspoken that actually push for the medicine that fixes stuff after the illness? In other words, they know that it's much better for pharma's interest, for example, or big hospitals. It's much better for them financially if they wait and don't come up with, for instance, a fasting regimen that'll keep people out of the hospital. Do you think there's an unspoken, let's call it a conspiracy? I hate that word because it's stupid, because everything's a conspiracy. It's two people talking to each other. But do you think there are people who know this and work actively to create such a system?
Well, the way that I would break that apart first pass is to say that because healthcare is so corporate in America, oftentimes the people at the very top are accountants, MBAs, executives who have no healthcare experience whatsoever. And the grand irony of that would be as if, like, you had a restaurant and you've never eaten your own food or never talked to a customer that went to your shop. You were just like a bean counter, that then said, hey, I think we should try this thing. When at some point it becomes a disconnect between the end user and the strategy. So I think that this in and of itself has really caused a big problem. Of course, what's the locus of control of an accountant? Finances. What's their bottom line? Profit. And so what gets rewarded gets done. And so if you put the leader, the visionary at the top, who's not really thinking about health, but is measured by other things, and their time horizon is every 6 months or every 4 months quarterly, you can create some really bad incentives to show quote unquote progress.
That
Um,
w But that's why the symbol of this kid who killed this CEO,
yeah.
I let's not get into the killing. Killing's bad. We already know this. That's not what I'm talking about. But the symbol of it really, it wasn't it wasn't for me, it was 3 layers deep, and many people took the first symbol, which is good job, the evil guy's dead. I thought that was wild how it really didn't just collapse into bad guy shooting,
Yeah.
innocent man was wild.
Well, the largest cause of bankruptcy in America is healthcare costs. And so there's a lot of bad blood, and there's a lot of ruined lives, and there's a lot of ruined communities.
Right.
I remember being in the ICU once. There was an Amish girl who was just desperately trying not to die, but she was going to. And at some point, the Amish community, who always pays in cash in central Pennsylvania for healthcare, said, "You know what? It's time to let go." And the reason for that is multifaceted, but part of it also is there is a community of tens of thousands of people who rely on that fund for the next cure. And if it's
Mm.
going to be futile, they understand that this person's going to God. And I think that culture does not exist,
Why would it?
ubiquitously in the U.S. on a secular level. And why would it? Why would it? When everything can kind of be, as I said before, institutionalized and solved through finances. And sometimes the reality is it can't be. We can't walk off cliffs against gravity. You can throw all the money in the world, other than maybe like the million stacking up to a stack of cash you can then step on as you're crossing the Grand Canyon. I don't see another way to get around it. But the point is that God's gravity wins at the end of the day, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of medicine and health is that way too. So yes, I think they is corporatism. I think that they're incentivized, and I think we all as smart people can justify all sorts of sins of omission and commission to
There you go.
our end
There you
goal.
go. That makes a lot of sense. It's consistent pattern of sins of omission. Yeah. All right. So go back to science then. So what happens to me when I walk, when I eat plant-based, and when I fast for these 18 hours?
Yeah, so this is the brilliant thing. First of all, I think it's important to kind of re-examine what our center is. So if I was to say, "Hey, what's our center?" Close your eyes. You might hold your head. Oh yeah, there's something like going on in there. That's where I am. But the reality is that our enteric nervous system, which of course all of these things are kind of spectrums, but enteric nervous system is connected to the brain, but it's considered separate from it in a way, and that lines our entire gut. And the enteric nervous system is physically larger than the brain. There's literally just more space that it takes up. So when people say, "Hey, go with your gut, man. What do you feel right now?" There's some brain power behind that. Like it's not just like, "Oh, like I feel this thing in my stomach." No,
Right.
your enteric nervous system is talking to you right now and saying, "Hey, this feels right or this doesn't feel right." And I don't think we should discount that feeling or that saying for that matter that persists in society. So it's physically larger. Second, within the intestine, there are 100 trillion bacteria. That's more cells than in your entire body are bacteria living in your gut. And this is important because those bacteria make cofactors, enzymes.
Wait. There's more cells living in my gut than there are in the whole rest of my body.
Exactly, exactly. And it's a complex market
That's
space.
crazy.
It's a complex market. And what's really fascinating about that is, like, I'll give you an example. Something like 80% of the serotonin that we make that our brain feeds off of to feel good comes and is made from bacteria in our gut. I mean, you really can't
Huh.
say that this intestine is separate from the brain. In fact, if anything, it tells me that the intestine is a branch into reality that is essential for us to perceive reality. And
Mm.
so, if the intestine is the enteric nervous system that lines the intestine is larger than the brain, bless you. If there's more
Forgive.
market players lined in that gut than there are in your body, you have to start thinking like, well, what is our center? And it turns out that something like 30% of our energy that we consume every day is just used to digest food that we eat every day. So it's a huge machine of energy by energy requirement. Um, Another thing too is, we're all sensitive. Someone pricks you with a needle on your skin, you say ouch, or you touch a flame. Well, the intestine itself is extremely sensitive, and there's this incredible scene in Braveheart where this guy's literally getting his intestines ripped out, and he's screaming freedom. We all know that scene from Mel Gibson.
Freedom.
Yeah, that's right. It's all there. Well, the reality is if you do that to rats, like you can torture a rat, which I guess scientists do all the time, and if you
Yeah.
touch their intestine, they die. So, what I'm saying is
Wait, is
there's
that true?
it is. If you start playing with their intestine while they're awake and you start moving things and burning things, what you could burn the skin, you burn part of the intestine, they just instantly like die. And
That's
so
Pete. That cool stuff, but that's nuts.
it
Really?
is. And I just bring it up to say that it's a sensitive system. And
Yeah.
so again, it's what is our center? Um, I also want to emphasize that, like, I was thinking about this the other day. Why do human beings kiss each other? Like, why is it that a guy, like, the most romantic scene, pulls the girl aside after World War II, opens his mouth, kisses the girl? What's going on there? And I'm starting to realize there's a lot. I think there's like hundreds of bacteria that live in your mouth that eventually go into your intestine. What are you learning about your partner
This
by
is
by absorbing, and like, are you becoming something by
you're going right
exchanging?
to that. Yeah, this that doesn't the tongue go all the way down, like halfway down to doesn't it? I'm serious. Isn't it really long? Doesn't it go down in the
Yeah,
crazy?
well, there's some saliva exchange. I bring that up to say again that there
No,
is
but
something.
that's like iconic. That's an image that yeah, that just hit me. That's
No, but
also
that's love,
gross.
right? That's love. It's an expression of love. So again, what are we trying to communicate with? And then I'll bring this all to sort of a religious center to say, why is it, of the many mysteries of the church, I believe there's 7 of them, why is it that communion, which is elevated as something we need every day for healing of both soul and body, why is it a food? Why is it a food? Like, why is it a substance that we ingest and digest? And why do we consider that day sacred for like 24 hours? And I won't go into the science because it's a little too raw for this discussion. But let me just put it this way: it is interesting to me that when you contaminate the mouth with whatever, that a lot of those criminal investigations have to be done within 24 hours, because then it
Mm.
then it clears. And so in my mind, it's like so interesting that the in the wisdom of the church, it's like, oh, this 24-hour period after having communion, don't maybe you might not even want to brush your teeth. Don't spit anything out. If you're bleeding, collect that. It's
Because it's something beyond just the regular digestion, just a perfunctory act of the body. It's something special about how we
well,
know the world.
yes,
And
and it echoes that. It echoes that medically and scientifically and physiologically. And so again, it's like, wow, there's this thing called communion, which is a food, which interacts with the enteric nervous system, which innervates our bacteria, which sends serotonin to our brain, which requires all this energy, and boom, that's considered like this very important interplay between the human body and spirituality. And then the next thing is a meal. And I know there are various cultures out there that really prioritize hospitality and meals, so meals with together. What is that all about? Well, in my opinion, to really break bread with a person is kind of like this ultimate ritual of interacting with some of the most core features of yourself through food, through the enteric nervous system, reaching the brain. And so I see it no coincidence that the church itself, in its 2,000 years of history, would create a ritual that emphasizes a food as maybe one of its highest pieces of theological ritual. And so all of this is supportive with this science that there's something really important going on there. It's
yeah,
not just an oil, it's not just a magical prayer. It is a physical exchange between the senses and the neurons in your body and the intestine, all these different things I mentioned that then reach you. And it might be a little bit of a reach, but I would like to say I think that the Orthodox Church recognizes that you reach the soul through the senses. And
right. So they're not separate. They're not. It's not a Gnostic event that we're talking about. Yes. Yeah.
And in fact, again, why is it that in the resurrection our bodies are to be resurrected with our souls? God came back as something people could touch. He ate, he interacted. Maybe he was beyond the physical laws at that time, but there's still something sort of being implied in our theology that the body is very special. It's a temple of our soul, and I think this is why beauty is such an important
Mhm.
concept of what it means to be human. And our bodies are the temples of that. Well, can be beautiful. Our bodies can be beautiful.
Amen.
So that's just like me emphasizing step one, that there's something really extraordinary going on, and I didn't create the body, God did. I didn't create the laws of physics, God did. And I always like to say this, religion answers the question why, and science answers the question how did God do it. Like,
Yeah.
and I think we oftentimes mix those questions and we start having these debates, but really we're talking about answering different questions. And
Yeah. I mean, there's
uh,
philosophers who argue. that science, the way we understand it, the science of matter, it can't even begin to touch the why question. It's not meant to, right?
Right. Right. It's a
That's not how people speak, though. That's not how they sound.
No, that
You know?
exactly. The moment a scientist goes from how to answer why, they're starting to create their own religion.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the way that we can, square that topic. Um, Another thing I want to emphasize is this too, is that the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system, which are part of the enteric nervous system, they have very crucial roles in innervating and communicating with every organ in our body. So I'll
All right,
give you an
take
example.
those apart for dumb
Yeah.
guys like me.
Yes.
Parasympathetic and sympathetic. Now, do they have a place in your body? In other words, could you actually touch them with a tweezer if you open me up and find parasympathetic and
Yeah.
sympathetic?
Yes, actually, one of the biggest nerves for the parasympathetic nervous system is the vagus nerve. It's a huge nerve. It's a cranial nerve. It starts in your brain, kind of goes down and just starts innervating everything.
And so both of those systems then are at work, you're saying, in a
Yeah,
unique way.
they're
Okay.
they're highly involved in systems of resting and digesting. That's the parasympathetic, and fight and flight. That's the sympathetic. So if you want more energy, you got to go sympathetic dominant. If you want to go resting and digesting, you go parasympathetic. You want to sleep, parasympathetic. When people are making love and doing whatever, there's a huge interplay between those two systems, and
That's interesting.
all of this allows for experience, and releases all sorts of catecholamines, neurotransmitters, etc., that guide and sort of flourish our experience out. The reason I bring this up is this: when you fast, when you intermittent fast, you turn on the sympathetic nervous system, you ramp that up, and when you do that, you end up getting this release of endorphins, catecholamines, serotonin, and this makes you feel good. It makes you feel good and it gives you energy. And so the idea, let's say in the American system, where people are supposed to eat, well, at least on average, this is culturally what's average. When people eat 11 times a day over 15 hours, you are constantly innervating your parasympathetic sympathetic nervous system. You're not just digesting, you're also resting. So if I'm at work and I'm snacking all day, I'm like, gosh, man, I'm feeling so low on energy. I need some more food. You are literally like being counterproductive in those moments. And so if you just turn on the sympathetic nervous system through fasting, you suddenly will find yourself with more energy,
Yeah.
more clarity, more focus. It's just science, but that's God's science, and that's the beauty behind
Well,
it.
explain that why it's God science. Explain that why, meaning that this was already a reality. It was known to people through the experience of asceticism. Is that what you mean by God
Yes,
science?
yes, I would say that maybe not the mechanism was known, but the experience was known and the command was there, and it's been there for the ancients. In fact, as far as I can tell, Adam had probably fasted. Abraham probably fasted. Moses probably fasted. All these people were fasting before there was even a Jewish
Well,
law.
they were supposed to fast from the tree. Oops.
That's right. That's right. The first commandment, of course, and that's just huge. And as I mentioned last time, what could God pick as a proxy for all future sin? Well, he chose a fasting practice, and I don't think that's a coincidence. Again, why is that not a coincidence? Because it's interacting with the biggest nervous system in our body, with the most players, with the most energy, with the most center. So I again, it's just like follow the breadcrumbs to say, hey, why would God pick a command in fasting to be so important?
So it's very, I- the word I'm thinking, this is serious business. Like,
It is.
in other words, it's not just sort of a choice. It's actually in a way to address illness. I'll tell you what, since we spoke, I'm not joking. This is not a joke. It's not an advertisement. I've been doing it.
Well,
I've been fasting 18 hours a day. I eat between 4 and 9.
wow.
And here's what happens though. Can you help me with this? For
Yeah.
everybody out there, best thing ever. Not joking. Also, the timing for me is wonderful because I'm really hungry at 4.
Yeah.
But here's the problem. And you got to address this right now for me and for everybody.
Yeah.
Man, I can eat though. I eat a lot between 4 and 9. This is one of the problems. And I feel like but here's the good news. I eat a lot, but I haven't put on any weight. I've lost weight, even though between 4 and 9 I'm eating too much. I know I'm eating too much because my stomach is sore. Does that sound like what am I classically screwing up?
No, no. I mean, first of all, just getting to that 18 hours is a win. That's a gold star right there. And you are resonating with the spiritual advice of many monks and ascetics before you. And I think God's going to take care of you for doing that. And so, you know, those 18 hours, your sympathetic nervous system is driven up. You're turning on all these different processes to get rid of cancer, to get rid of illness, to get rid of bacterial infections. Your inflammation's going down. Your cholesterol's improving. All of these things are happening, and so then we talk about the 4 hours of eating. What I would tell you in that regard is that's where the next prong comes in, which is we got to make sure your protein's high enough, and we got to make sure it's plant based. And eating a little bit more fat than what you're used to probably will keep you more satiated, for the next round of fasting.
Okay, okay, that's helpful. So go a little higher on the fats.
Yeah, so I would say coconut oil is great, olive oil is great.
But not like a juicy pork?
No, 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 not at least not for the purposes of the lengths. Now I will
Well,
say,
I can stay away from that during the Orthodox.
yeah,
But I'm talking like on a delicious, Thursday afternoon.
right now. Like for instance, today, I mean, I'm still doing the intermittent fasting piece. I'm still doing the exercise piece, but I am eating, meat, fish, dairy, whatever I want. And
Okay, good, we're on the same page.
yeah, I'm really trying to up the protein, and this is also key too, because the Athos diet, the send off voyage is the 48 days of Great Lent. But really, what I try to tell people is just use this dynamically, whether it's a fasting food or not, Orthodox style. Just incorporate the quality and macronutrients as the calendar allows.
Hey, guys, recently, at First Things, our most fabulous site, Mozambique, where we've had 2 guys, Vanguard, going in there. Vanguard means first in. We've gone in, and they've been there for almost 2 years, Dimitri and Jacob. Uh, the site was being understood. We were building it. As Jacob says in his blog, which I want you to read, which I will link, and we'll link it right here on the screen for you. As Jacob says, things were becoming clear. We had a telos, and we could see the next year in Mozambique and how our projects would be affecting people. And all of that was happening when the powers of politics took over in Mozambique. An election happened. And of course, as many of us feared here in the States, the election was not honored in its finality. One candidate said that what is said to have happened did not, which was that the other candidate won. And so a Supreme Court decision about a month ago, right before Christmas, 25th, right before the 25th, a Supreme Court decision in Mozambique itself declared the winner to be the party that was already in power, and the minority party went ballistic. And in going ballistic, they began to burn stuff down, have riots, people got shot in the streets, and our field workers were, shall we say, how should we say, noticed by the rioting crowds because of their foreignness, let's say. And basically, through the goodwill that they've earned, they fled into various local places with local families, including into our beloved Salome, Sister Salome's location, a Catholic nun who we work with there. We were working with on a school project. Well, they went to her, they fled, she hid them. And basically, a few Mozambican angry people were trying to, I think, probably extort First Things for some money by, let's just say, kidnapping these young guys. The long story is told in the blog by our wonderful field worker, Jacob. You can learn more about it in that blog. You can go to news reports. But our guys were under serious duress for at least 2 straight days. Their homes were burned after they left. But the local population is waiting for them to return. And so our Mozambican work is up in the air. What I'd like you to do, given this very difficult story, is to consider supporting the folks who Jacob and Dimitri left behind. And so there's a fund and there's a link. You'll find it in this edition of Heavy Things Lightly, where if you think about $7 a week, so think about giving 4 times 7, $28. which would feed a family for a month. Um, this is the hardest time in Mozambique right now. They call it the time of hunger. It's about a 3-month period when the wealth of the harvest starts to run out. And so Jacob and Dimitri would love if you consider helping people they left behind, the same people that helped them to leave safely from a very violent situation. We're trying to raise about $5,000. You can find the link. Andrew's putting it right now in the video. Thank you. Consider these men and their work and the people that help them to be safe by considering creating this fund for their difficulties in this very tough time in Mozambique. All right. Thank you. Back to our conversation with Dr. Patitsas. I've been doing this. I haven't missed in a month, and I'm just telling you guys,
Great.
it's exactly the thing. I'm a human advertisement. Now, but again, I can tell I eat too much, so I'm working on that.
Well, I will tell you, there are studies that show that when you intermittent fast and you still eat as many calories as the person who's eating the same number of calories but snacking all day, you actually still lose weight. You actually still lose weight. So there's something going on there that increases your metabolism that is still resulting in you sort of dropping some pounds, and do that consistently, and the weight will tally up.
Yeah.
I wanted to get back to the sympathetic, parasympathetic one last time,
please do.
just to give one example in medicine how this plays out. So when a person takes cocaine or methamphetamine or an upper of some sort, they aren't injecting or consuming or snorting catecholamines. They are consuming something that forces the release of those natural substances from your body. And so what I'm trying to say is, you have that power in you. You just need to release it through some natural mechanism, and preferably not through drug abuse. But fasting is one of those ways. Fasting is one of those ways. And so I think it's really important.
How does that work?
Well, there's something about the sympathetic nervous system that when it registers you're not eating, it's like, hey, we need to make sure that John is on his A game. We need to give him energy to go run down the antelope, or think through a solution that can solve his problem of hunger. It's a very important thing to do. And so your body has associated that state of hunger with, hey, it's time to be on your A game. And so that's the sympathetic nervous system. I bring this all up to say, when like most kids these days are on ADHD and have focus problems, one of the ways that they could naturally increase the same substances that Adderall does, Concerta does, all these various drugs, that what they do is by fasting. And you wonder why these kids have these huge problems with focus when they're eating constantly. And that's the culture. And really what they should be doing is some form of fasting, some form of intermittent fasting anyway. And I just think that's very important to say, because there's such a national problem with ADHD and behavioral issues. And if we could just go back to the food, it would solve a lot of problems.
But it makes sense. This is, again, you can't divorce this. The body and the spirit are not like two events happening separately in time. It's just nuts.
I heard this beautiful analogy once. They were saying, take a bird, okay? A bird is trying to fly, and the flying is like the spiritual life. We're flying through the air, and hey, the bird just wants to fly faster, go higher, and it starts getting really annoyed and pissed off that it has to deal with the friction from wind. Well, why don't we have this thing fly in a vacuum? What happens? It can't fly anymore. You need that wind. You need the friction. And what I'm trying to say is, I feel like in our spiritual lives, we need the material to create that friction so that we can fly. And so we don't want to divorce and separate out the flying from the wind, the flying from the friction, the fasting from the spirituality. It's all part of the same process.
Yeah. What's your biggest, when you've written a book, people talk to you, they call you, they come, you're a doctor. What gets in the way of people adopting this? For me, I'd already been fasting. It wasn't that big of a deal to try to figure this out. And I already know monasticism. It was a bridge very close, not too far. And so what gets in the way what's the hardest thing? Why won't people do it, or how do they fail?
Well, it's a cultural thing, you know. It's the fact that we're materialistic, we're hedonistic. We think that happiness is the greatest good. We think that self-serving impulse and feeding the animal side of ourselves is the highest good, and so as a result, we create an economy around that where we eat more than the rest of the world. We throw out more of our food than the rest of the world. We're overweight. We're morbidly obese. We have all sorts of problems that then stem from that sin of gluttony and you know, I think it was a Polish man actually in the 80s, maybe the 90s, that wrote the book The Witcher, which is now a TV show. It's pretty risque, but I'll say that the premise of the book is pretty strong, which is something like men sin and create monsters, and then this figure like Jesus Christ is to come in and just clear house. And I just feel like it's the same thing. Like we have these sins of gluttony, of lust, of materialism, of envy, etc., and they over time manifest as true physical
Yeah.
illness, if not societal problems, but it all starts with the spiritual beginning. So that's how I would say that this is fundamentally just as fundamentally a spiritual problem that then becomes a physical one if we're not careful.
So
Uh,
then when people are failing, what's your what's that's probably a spiritual fix to to the fasting failure, right?
well, I mean, if, you know, a lot of people say that the beginning of sobriety or the beginning of progress is self awareness, but I would say a step even before that is humility. Like
Mhm.
we need to be humble enough to see the solutions that are being offered to us, and this is what the most beautiful thing is about the faith and about our fasting practice is it's so simple. It reminds me of this Old Testament passage. I'm going to get it wrong here, but I think it was the prophet Samuel, but there was this general who had leprosy, and he asked the prophet, "Hey, you know, I need to get healed." And eventually, the prophet says, "Sure, just go wash in the Jordan River." And he's like, "That's all you want me to do? Like, just go into this simple water and like bathe 3 times, and you don't want me to climb a mountain or do this or do a backflip or some feat of strength?" They're like, "No, just go do something simple," and it worked. And so
And
I would just say is that it's the same thing with fasting. We're looking for these medicines, for these high flying solutions, and really what it is just the basic fasting principles in their true form. I'll say because that's what the Athos Diet is. It's Christian fasting done right. It's for healing of both soul and body, and so I feel like what happen needs to happen is Americans have to understand they need a spiritual life, and within that spiritual life, part of being a body of the church is our few commandments. One of those is fasting, and it's gonna reap benefit.
can I go back to the nervous systems and
Yeah,
maybe a technical? I'll sound stupid, but I think I'll sound stupid on behalf of other people.
yeah, I'm sure you will.
Let me put it like that. I think we're not as stupid as I'm about to sound. But so the nervous system called the sympathetic and the parasympathetic.
Mhm.
There a nervous system to me when I hear that as someone who didn't study the science is meant to acquire the reality around them. Like
Mm,
in other words, I touch, right? I'm my nerves are so
mm.
these systems that are embedded sort of in our body, they're acquiring the physical reality around me. But you're saying they also produce the system produces something within inside of me. Do I have that question
Yeah,
correct?
you might say that it produces the currency of that nervous system through neurotransmitters. It helps create those things, and it helps stimulate the balance of those release and the sustaining communication of
And,
those substances.
and the release is something like we would equate with like health and goodness. In other words, do we need that this system to release and it doesn't when we're always feeding ourselves? Do I have that kind of right?
Well, I mean, depending on what aspect you're trying to emphasize, I mean, if the neurons in your body have these things called synaptic clefts, and they release neurotransmitters into those little air spaces so that they can communicate with the next neuron, and all of those things then get communicated through the pulsing frequency, the uptake,
I
the
see.
type of neurotransmitters being released. So all of this stuff is at play, but we also need through the digestive system to create those neurotransmitters. And we
Yeah.
also, through the nervous system, need to understand when to release them and how to regulate them. And this is all part of
So
that, like,
our choices in what I put here are gonna influence what I can produce and what I can't produce in terms of those 2 systems, I see. And
yes.
and then that also again, I'm going back to the concept of nerve, of being dumb, but that's something to do with how I feel, right? In other words,
Yes. Yes. Ultimately, the like I said, the currency, the building blocks, the mechanistic uh, uh, aspect of how this stuff is experienced is through this material world, and it's why if I put someone to sleep with a sedative, they're not feeling anything because I'm blocking the communication, lines
right.
or that experience, and so it is interesting that like, that we have this technology now that can sort of turn off our ability to feel pain. And then we can stimulate euphoria and ecstasy and all sorts of other things through substances. It's so funny. I don't know if you've heard about these recent Neuralink studies. I think this is just wild, but Neuralink is figuring out a way to tap on parts of the brain where you can even experience ecstasy, orgasm,
Mhm.
endorphin release, etc. And I was starting to think to myself, what does this say about the nature of sin? Just hold with me for like 30 seconds. So
No, it's interesting.
let's just say a million years ago or a long time ago, there was a man plagued by lust. How did he fulfill that? How did he manifest that vice in his life? Maybe he found some unsuspecting woman, he assaulted her, he had his way, he moves on. Okay. Let's say another 100,000 years pass by or however much time passed. Now we have some civilization. Now there's a prostitute. Okay. The guy still has lust. Maybe it's not violent. Maybe it's consensual, but he's able to fulfill that sensation through this sinful practice. Then you go another several thousand years. Now it's pornography. There's no human being. It's all virtual,
Yeah.
but there's still this expression of lust. Now in 2025, we get rid of the violence. We get rid of the monetary exchange. We get rid of the virtual, the auditory, the visual, and now it's just literally a feeling. And what's so wild to me is that as I started to break apart this onion, I started to realize that maybe sin is not so much okay, maybe it gets manifested, absolutely, and there's all sorts of second, tertiary order effects of being sinful. But maybe also what sin is a decoupling of reality. It's like fundamentally sin is a lie. It's like you think you're having an orgasm right now because you're stimulating something in your brain, but you're actually not doing anything. And it's a lie. It's an illusion. It's a delusion. And I think that was pretty powerful because in a certain sense through technology we've been able to move this experiment so far forward, and we still think to ourselves, wait, even though we're getting rid of the individuals, the sensory information, the monetary exchange, there's still this thing called sin, and it's a I think fundamentally what it is, it's a decoupling of reality. It's fundamentally a lie that you're allowing yourself to
But
experience.
it's just such a good well, it is a lie. The devil is the first liar. So
Right.
don't for folks who aren't religious, don't hear it like that. Hear it like this. The first step in destroying reality is to create dissolution, or in other words, is to move away from that which is.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's to lie. It's to tell something like an untruth, which really is brilliant the way you're saying it. It made me think of symbolos in the Greek, which is to be something to be united,
Hmm.
and and diabolos,
Hmm.
which is what becomes the Latin word for the devil,
The devil, right? Yeah.
is
Yeah.
that which separates. And so that which moves, yeah, like you're saying, which moves us further away from what is symbolos, what is real, to what is unreal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense.
like it's so strange, but it really kind of shows the full face of what sin is. And we could take that sort of thought process, I think, through a lot of different examples of the different types of sins. But just as an example, um, but then the next prong, of this incredible fasting, science is that 80% of our genes are linked to a 24-hour circadian rhythm. So in other words, if we confuse our bodies through time, literally through time, through the clock, we can make our physiological processes inefficient. And this is being now studied as a reason why many women are infertile. A lot of them are eating all day long, and they're literally confusing their physiological processes with
And they're
what
up late. They're up
yeah,
late.
and they're up late and they're not sleeping enough. And never, even if you could still get the hormones released, it's not the right dance. It's not the right cadence and rhythm. It's not the right timing. It's like going to the movie 30 minutes late. It's getting to the matinee, at night when it's supposed to be at 2 p.m. Like everything is just off. And so 80% of our genes are coordinated with when we actually look at light and when we eat. Actually, those are the two biggest drivers. And so I think this is really important. Again, recognizing the power of food and when we're intaking that food. And so again, when a monk is waiting to the ninth hour when Christ was crucified, or waiting till communion to have communion every day, if he can keep that ritual and that rhythm and that pattern, his body can synchronize to that, and they're getting health benefit. In fact,
Yeah.
I should tell you, studies show that when you intermittent fast, but you're doing it in a process that doesn't sort of synchronize with sleeping, you're only getting a fraction of the benefit. So
Is that right?
they take mice and they basically force them to eat during the day when they're actually nocturnal animals, and they don't get the full intermittent fasting benefit, even though they're eating during a confined window. So it just goes to show that there's this very important physiology that needs to be respected in terms of like, hey, when do we have liturgy? It's in the morning. It's not in the
Yeah.
afternoon. It's not at night.
That's right.
We have it in the morning. Why is that? Again, trust the church. So there's that. I don't know if you ever heard of sirtuins. They call them the Magnificent Seven. So when you're intermittent fasting, there are 7 sirtuins that get released that literally heal your telomeres on your DNA, the DNA itself, that make your mitochondria more optimal. Those are the organelles of your cell that create energy. And there's such effective molecules in your cells that they have now become cancer targets, to help you, fix problems before they start. I mean, again, all of these things get upregulated when you fast. So as you're going into communion, your body is literally healing in that journey towards the goal. Autophagy is another mechanism that cells use to heal themselves. So if you are fasting, even as early as 12 hours into a fast, again, not eating a calorie, you can drink all the water you want, but not eating a calorie, autophagy starts to upregulate. And there's these thing called lysosomes in the cell that get rid of old, let's call it furniture and damaged products. Again, if you want to sidestep all the cancers, I think 40% of all Americans will have cancer at some point in their life. If you want to hit
Yeah.
that cancer before it begins, you need to fast and upregulate the sirtuins so they can heal you before big problems occur.
Um, wow.
And autophagy
So
gets turned on, yeah.
and so these things aren't okay, let's go over this concept of proven.
Mhm.
I'm starting to know proven as an older guy who's Orthodox. It's just that which experientially I'm aware of. And
Mm.
like I don't really, but would you call these things proven using some sort of
I
scientific
mean, autophagy
standard?
has been recognized or studied, or we've been aware of it for 8 years. The sirtuins have been studied, I think, for at least 20 years. I mean, we can replicate these findings. We can replicate them in different mammals. We can create drugs that mimic their effects, and that we can see the effect. So in that regard, I would suggest that it's proven, and that many people experience it, benefit from it, and we can study it. And it's not just something unique to the elite, but is in every human being.
Yeah,
That has this same physiology. It's pretty wild.
yeah.
Um, another thing I want to highlight is that when you fast, eventually you break through all or burn through all that sugar storage in your body. That's called glycogen, and then you start burning ketones. Well, ketones act on the same GABA receptors that alcohol acts on, and benzodiazepines were for anxiety. And a quarter of all women in America have anxiety. It's disabling. And wouldn't it
Did you
be
say a
interesting?
quarter, 25%?
Quarter, 25% of all women, at least. But imagine if they
Yikes.
were to take fasting seriously, get off the addictive substances, which many people are on, and they can manage medically these issues with a natural practice called fasting. Again, it's like if you want to have trust in the Lord, trust in the faith, and there is a mechanism that will literally physically support that, manifest that doesn't come with addiction, that doesn't come with
Yeah, the
a horse
opposite.
gambling problem. You can still get to work. You're not inebriated and intoxicated like alcohol. For example, um,
Wait,
even
what
though,
about Ozempic? You saying we shouldn't? Yeah, yeah, look at your face. Did you guys see his face? He was like, "Really, John?"
Well, I think I might have mentioned this, but again, people who oftentimes sidestep the work that needs to be done for these things, and again, sometimes people just need a boost, to get started. I respect that. But as I mentioned last time with gastric bypass, oftentimes people undergo that surgery and they just take on another addiction. Now they drink alcohol instead of eat food. Now they're smoking and they just one vice for another. And I understand that, but Ozempic is a big problem, to be honest. They're even recommending it for children. I think it's what it's going to do.
Like,
What
by
it's
any stretch, what is that? We have to stop. Let's do something. Let's have a march. That's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
no, right, right. It's a powerful peptide that does work. I've seen a lot of people in the ERs with liver inflammation, gallbladder infections, nausea and vomiting. They're sleeping all day with these drugs. I mean, it's not without side effects. But if you're 600 pounds and it's the lesser of all evils, maybe the first 200 pounds you can lose through Ozempic. But just to say is fasting might be something culturally we want to do instead that doesn't cost anything
Let's do it.
and that
Well,
allows us
that's
to be
my next question
spiritual
for
in
you,
the process. Yeah.
Dr. Pete. I got another question for you. So there is a sense that culture can heal if
Mhm.
more and more of us fast. The problem is, I think many people on the pod are like, "Well, what if you just like fast, but you don't even know what communion is?" Because I think I just want to explain something for many people listening who won't know this. You're supposed to fast before communion.
Right.
I don't think people like, even Orthodox, like, what do you mean? Like, you're not supposed to eat any food or drink really even
Right.
any water for long periods, 12 hours before communion. Other traditions are even longer. So hold on though. What if society adopts the fasting but doesn't adopt the communion? What happens?
Well,
That
I think I'd approach this from a number of different ways. I mean, one is I would say, hey, if Jordan Peterson, by breaking down the New Testament and Old Testament into these like meta narrative, mechanistic, how to get better. I mean, a lot of people are finding faith through what you
Yeah,
could
it's
say
true.
is almost like a
True.
secularized version of the themes. So there's some benefit to that, but are they getting the fullness? No, they're not. And so what I'll say is, in as much as you participate in the wisdom and traditions of the church, you will reap the fruits of that decision. And so, would I love to see America tomorrow decide to intermittent fast and do the things I'm recommending? I mean, I think so, but for it to be sustained, for it to be really incorporated as a lifestyle
Yeah, as a
and also
culture. Yeah.
and encouraged, yes, it will take a cultural movement and it will take a religious underpinning of that to see it through. Otherwise, it'll just be a fad diet. It'll just be something you do for 30 days and fail out. And then, as I mentioned before, Americans were the most obese people in the world, but we spend more money on weight loss than any other country in the world, and we're just not good at losing weight. So you can already sort of say what happens when we just encourage people to be healthy. Well, it doesn't have the glue, to stick.
Mhm. How are people receiving your book?
Um, I mean, it's actually been really well received. I mean, I've sold books now in every continent that there are human beings other than Antarctica. All through, thank God, technology like Amazon.
Are there really people in Antarctica though?
Right.
Let's put
Right.
it out there.
Let's be honest. Let's be honest. And then at the same time, I'm a lot of the podcasts are getting some traction. And I'll also say this, it's wild to me to see how many Protestants are out there also dabbling in this world of fasting.
Yeah,
Like they're
yeah.
they're like, wow, this is really useful, and they talk about it for experientially, and more power to them. But this has been worked out. Like this has been worked out a long time ago, and we can't afford to reinvent the wheel every generation. We need to build on the traditions, optimize them, find best practices, and move forward. And so, there's a repository of wisdom here in our faith that I think needs to be shared. And I'm
Well,
trying to do
when
that.
Christ says these things can only come out through prayer and fasting. So here's the thing. That wasn't a that wasn't a that wasn't a through whatever you feel like doing fasting. That had already been an established tradition about what that meant. This is and it had its own cyclical sort of reality, and people knew what that meant beyond, like, I'm gonna fast today for Jimmy. Like, well, it was beyond that already as a system when Christ is speaking it, 2 millennia ago, and it only makes sense that the church would have inherited that which already was. And now here we are 2,000 years later with a book. that's really doing a very beautiful job of updating that which already was.
Yes.
S
It's just, it's bringing light back to an old topic, but it also it's kind of like I said, peeling back the onion of all the mechanism that's there to sort of say, "Hey, 21st century citizen, member of humanity, here's let me talk to you on your level because everyone's kind of science, intoxicated these days, and I'll give it to you in the science format. But, by all means, understand this is a spiritual practice underneath it all. And and just like Thomas. I mean, Thomas, obviously, the doubting apostle, he had a lot of faith in many ways. He was there to see God, but he doubted and he had to physically interact with God in order to believe. And so if we have to get 2024, citizens of humanity to kind of be doubting Thomases to eventually believe, then I'd say, hey, that's worth it. But it's okay. It'd be better if we didn't have to do that stuff, but it's worthwhile. I don't want to leave anything on the table here. So let me just a few more things real quick.
Alright, go. And then
There-
I'm gonna end with one more question.
Sure. There's this thing called BDNF. When you intermittent fast, BDNF goes way up in your brain and it's neuroprotective. Huntington's disease, Alzheimer's, dementia, even diabetes, all of these, Lou Gehrig's disease, all these things have low amounts of BDNF. You get a release of that when you fast. And then finally, which is interesting, right? I mean, again, all these things that we can sidestep as a result of doing fasting. And then, of course, there's this idea of how cholesterol lowers, hypertension lowers, inflammation lowers across your body. All is proven, all is suggested over and over again that when you fast, these things improve. So, again, it's like, do you want to sidestep 80 to 90% of all preventable disease or disease, period? Yes, fast. Do you want to live 30 to 40% longer and be there for your grandkids? Fast. Do you want to be there for the holiday? Because in as little as 30 days, you can prevent yourself from maybe having that heart attack that's going to occur on Pascha this year or Easter. Fast. So all of this is God's how into how he allows fasting to be this spiritual practice that heals both soul and body. And the Athos Diet is the book that just tries to make that proof, just tries to put the proof in the pudding and explain how that is.
Well, I like it. Well, you're combining, this sort of unspoken inherited tradition with a modern understanding and the science. So, I mean, look, all this stuff was all it is. This is like God. God is. This stuff
Yeah.
is. Whether or
Yes.
not you write the book, but we need it because in the 21st, right in the 21st century, we are these creatures that want the scientific stuff to line up, and it lines up. And that's what's really cool is that your analysis is both scientific and spiritual, as all truths are. So,
Well, I think also it's important too, and especially as we live in a place like the United States where there's 30,000 different versions of Christianity. I mean, we have to be aware that we can delude ourselves. And one of the beautiful things about science is that when you have 30,000 different opinions on something, what is going to find move the discussion forward with some type of reality based information. And so this is where I think science can be a wonderful augment or partner to the spiritual life. It's like, wait, there's all these things that could be that I could convince myself of, Scientology, Mormonism, just name it, various cult leaders. What can I use that will allow me to sort of make sure I'm not just deluding myself? And I think sometimes science can be a really wonderful partner in that regard. So when it comes to fasting, be careful because there's many different practices out there. But what I'm trying to tell you is these three pillars of intermittent fasting, plant-based protein, and walking really are valid, proven, reproducible, time-tested, and it's just time to fast. And if I could just give one example from the ER from a few not so long ago, I had a toddler that was coming and basically dying from pneumonia. And she was a little girl that had been sick for 2 weeks. And what was so crazy about it was that this girl arrived like 5 minutes after two other people. And I was just literally doing CPR on a patient who died, unfortunately, while I was waiting to go see them because I just couldn't get away from doing CPR to go take care of the next patient. And 40 minutes after they all arrived, instead of me taking care of the well-appearing guy who's middle-aged and the pretty well-appearing 50-year-old woman who is, you know, well appearing. I went and got the sickest person first. That's just standard, right? I'm going to take care of the heart attack before I take care of the
Yep. That
bruised
sounds
ribs.
like an emergency room to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I take care of this little toddler, this little cute girl, little cutie pie, and you would not believe how much those two people complained to the mother in front of me. And I was just like, gosh, man, what country, what society do we live in culturally where people can step over a dying toddler because they want to be seen sooner? Like, are we talking about sandwiches or where we're going to sit on the airplane? So anyway, you see this all the time in the ER, and I just realized to myself, guys, we need to create something like fasting in our society where there's civilization and convenience and compartmentalization of suffering so that we can be raw and prepared when it matters most.
Man.
Like you need to learn delayed gratification and sacrifice and humility and frankly speaking, just be a little bit turned down a little bit so that you can let the toddler live. And it's just an unfortunate thing. I'd like to say that happens very rarely, but it happens all the time.
Does it?
Happens all the
Yeah. You
and
guys, first of all,
this is the cure.
you have most incredible stories because your work is incredible. You literally are describing partially what we try to do with first things. That's why our guys go live hard. They're trying to what you just said is they're trying to acquire the scars. They're trying to acquire the toughness to be able to actually see clearly what is most important. And you're right. Those patients couldn't see clearly. Yeah, man, what a story. That's
It's time to fast. It's time to fast. We need a cultural
time to
shift.
fast. It's
And
time
the
to
only
fast.
thing that is core enough to our being to really make fundamental change of this giant ship is something as core as what fasting does to every cell in our body. I'd like to say that, Jonathan Pajot talks a lot about these fractals stacking up to the highest aim, which Jordan Peterson says is the meta narrative, the highest one, which is Christianity. What I will say about fasting is the way you get down to the deepest parts of ourselves is through the mechanisms of our physiology, and fasting through the calendar of the church, linking the highest with the lowest, is that communication step. It is the alignment and it is the feedback, and all healthy organisms have feedback. And this is the way that we connect our base physiology with the highest spiritual good. And fasting is that bridge. And I just can't say it enough.
Well, you said it. I I have a super practical question, but I don't even wanna ask it now because that was such a beautiful ending. Maybe I'll ask it off camera. I feel like such a jerk now. I'm like, like, what happens when I"
Whatever you want. It's your podcast.
Alright,
We
it's
can
gonna
we
take
can
but
answer
we
it.
got it's a quick answer because we gotta go. We don't have to go, but I could keep talking forever. Here's the quick one. This is like it's just practical, but that was so perfect. We might cut this, Andrew, but I'm gonna ask a practical question. You ready?
I'm ready.
Um, let's say that I just ate a little bit later, and then that means I just fast longer the next day. How do you like, maybe your book addressed this, you don't wanna say because then people won't read it, but like
No, no, no.
the
Good
practical
question.
application of the thing, right?
I mean, you're getting great physiological benefit even at 16 hours. If you yourself personally are even eating in a smaller window, like 4 hours, kudos to you. If you're really eating at 4 hours, I wouldn't change a thing the next day. It's okay that you just kind of expanded your window the day before. However, if you're already on, let's say, the 8 hour maximum, you're like, oh, I just want a little bit more, or I'm going to extend,
Don't do it then. That makes sense. Yeah.
or yeah, and if I shift it, then I would say, hey, just shift things a little bit, and on a good day, kind of get catch up and get back.
And reset.
So,
Reset.
yeah, yeah, it's okay.
And you're doing it, right? You
I am.
do it. And let me ask you one other thing. Do you ever stop and then reset? Like, is it good, or do you just do this every day for the rest of your life?
I do it every day for the rest of my life in the sense that during the tempo of the church, I'm doing the plant-based protein when it's required, and then on a day like today, because it's Thursday, the 16th of January, my eating window opened up actually at like 12:30. I'm gonna have a big dinner here in the next hour, meat, dairy, lots of protein, lots of fats, low carb, and then my window shuts right around 4 p.m. I'm good to the next day.
Gosh, it tastes good though when you wait.
You
It's
get
delicious.
it's so intentional. It's so intentional, and it's supposed to be that way. But I'll tell you this: in February, taking the wife on a nice vacation down south where it's sunny. Will I do any fasting for those 4 days? Probably not. Probably.
Oh, and then you reset.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just saying is, and I don't go on vacation a lot, but, for then at that time, there's a time for everything. And, that's not the time for fasting.
All right, guys, this is so good. Guys, you getting this for free. You should go and get this book. All right,
Oh,
I'm gonna say thank you and goodbye, and you're wonderful. And we're gonna just keep talking because you also have a great story for our next pod whenever we do it. On of course fasting and all this, but also your journey through Orthodoxy and sort of back into the Greek church, out of the GOC, all that conversation. I would love to have that. That's an interesting conversation. You could be our expert on that. So thank you, Dr. Pete. Appreciate
I'm
it.
a survivor, John. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Okay.
All right. God bless. Take care. All right, guys. A couple things. We're going to go try to do some podcasts at a place called London with a group called ARC. I got invited to the VIP tent. I'm not down on anybody because one of my new pals, Mr. Jonathan Pajot, he's actually like working with ARC because ARC has great potential. But I got to tell you, it makes me uncomfortable. You see this? I'm stretching. I don't know. I haven't decided that it's my favorite spot in the world, but I have decided that it's a good place to go and, well, chat it up and see what life's like there with these movers and shakers who are trying to do something like the opposite of the World Economic Forum. The problem's not in the opposite of the World Economic Forum. That's probably not a bad idea. The problem is it's made in the image of the World Economic Forum. That's the problem. But I know they're addressing that, but I'm going to be there. We got some cool invitations, man. And we continue to raise money for First Things Foundation. What we're really good at, although recently you wouldn't know it, is because we've had a few field workers have to come home. We're really good at trying to help young men and women to come to realize who they are through the process of purification, which leads to illumination. Because we're an ascetic event, an spiritually athletically event. In other words, you go and live hard. You live in mud huts. You might get stuff like malaria. Like if you do that, you gotta be tough. And that toughness tends to create a type of spiritual wisdom. So come be a field worker. We're looking for folks right now for West Africa and soon Guatemala. ¿Por qué no? Become a monthly donor. If you just do that alone, I'll come to your house and sing. Nah, probably not. I don't know if you're doing like $5,000 a month. Let's do it. Let's have a party. $5 a month? Come on, man. Can't get on a plane and sing for that. You're like, thank God. Guys, become a monthly donor. Check us out. Cool stuff coming, including some stuff with some pretty high-level folks. Some interviews as we build out Heavy Things Lightly. Much love to all you guys, supporters. Get ready. We're going to have another phone call. I know I haven't had one as we've been traveling over Christmas. Much love. Peace out. Gage Marjos.